The last person to see 9-year-old Elizabeth alive wasn't a stranger. She was the teenage girl next door who had already chosen the spot to hide a body. St. Martin's, Missouri, is the kind of town where people leave their doors unlocked. In October 2009, it held fewer than 2,000 residents. Children played in the streets until the streetlights came on. Elizabeth Olton was 9 years old. She lived with her parents and siblings in a modest home on a quiet residential road. She loved swimming in the family pool, climbing trees, and riding her bike. 4 houses down lived the Bustamante family, though the true caretakers were grandparents Gary and Karen Brooks. They had taken in their 4 grandchildren after years of instability. The oldest was Alyssa Bustamante, 15 years old. Small, just 110 pounds, but sharp. Teachers placed her in gifted programs. She received a school award for helping younger children. To her younger brother Nathaniel, she was a leader. On the surface, both girls belonged to the same peaceful neighborhood. Elizabeth would sometimes walk over to play with Alyssa's younger sister, Emma. No one saw any warning signs. No one could have predicted that. Before the month ended, one of these girls would be dead, and the other would confess to murder. Alyssa's childhood had not begun in St. Martin's. Her mother struggled with addiction, moving the family constantly. By age 7, Alyssa had attended at least 8 different schools. Her father was absent. When her grandparents finally gained custody, they hoped stability would heal old wounds. For a while, it seemed to work. Alyssa blossomed academically, but beneath the honor roll exterior, she carried deep pain. At 12, she began seeing counselors. She was prescribed Prozac, 20 milligrams, an adult dose. She weighed barely 100 pounds. Her grandparents noticed dark moods and long silences. Then came a suicide attempt that landed her in the hospital. She survived, physically recovered, and returned home. The scars remained, visible on her arms. She would later describe feeling empty, disconnected. The medication her grandmother believed was too strong. It made her wild. By 15, Alyssa had learned to hide her inner world. She smiled at school. She helped the younger students. But behind her bedroom door, she wrote disturbing words on the walls and kept a journal that no one was allowed to read. Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, began like any school day. Elizabeth attended class. Alyssa attended class. By mid-afternoon, both were home. At 4:30, Elizabeth asked her mother if she could go to Alyssa's house. The answer was no. The family had a church event that evening. Elizabeth's mother was preparing treats and dance instructions. But Elizabeth asked again. Could she and her little sister Emma just play in the woods behind the houses? Permission was granted. The girls left. That was the last time Elizabeth's mother saw her daughter alive. At 6 o'clock, Elizabeth had not returned. Her mother assumed she was still in the woods. Then, at 6:30, the front door slammed open. Elizabeth's older sister Alyssa, not the child, ran upstairs. Her mother later recalled the footsteps as unusually loud, almost urgent. Moments later, Elizabeth's younger brother knocked on the Bustamante door. Where was his sister? Alyssa told him Elizabeth had left, was walking home, and that everything was fine. It was a lie. Elizabeth never walked home. By 7 p.m., Elizabeth's mother called the sheriff. The officer on duty, Sheriff Greg White, was at a church security workshop. He left immediately and drove to St. Martin's. The night was already dark, but heavy clouds and torrential rain made conditions brutal. Search and rescue teams set up a command post. 300 volunteers, neighbors, friends, strangers, formed a grid across 60 acres of woods and farmland. Elizabeth had a cell phone. In 2009, tracking technology could only narrow her location to a broad area, but that area matched the search zone. Teams worked through the rain, using electronic trackers to ensure every square inch was covered at least twice. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Flashlights cut through the darkness. But the storm only worsened. High winds knocked down branches. The ground became mud. By midnight, it was too dangerous to continue. The search was called off until dawn. Sometime during that night, Elizabeth's phone battery died. The signal disappeared, and the best chance to find her alive was gone. Greater urgency. The Missouri State Highway Patrol set up checkpoints, stopping every vehicle that passed through St. Martin's. Volunteers returned, though hope was fading. Then searchers found something odd in the woods behind Alyssa Bustamante's house. It was a hole, not a random depression or an animal den. This hole was a perfect rectangle, 3 feet wide, nearly 5 feet long, and about 2 feet deep, freshly dug, the exact size of a small grave. Investigators had seen holes like this before, usually covering a body. When questioned, Alyssa said she had been bored. She liked digging holes for dead cats, she explained. She had buried animals in the same woods, but the timeline troubled the detectives. Witnesses said the hole had been there before Elizabeth disappeared, several days before. That meant someone had prepared a grave in advance. The focus of the investigation shifted. Elizabeth was still missing, missing, but the last person known to have seen her was no longer just a witness. She was a 15-year-old girl who had dug a rectangle in the woods and then lied about when she dug it. On October 23rd, 2 days after Elizabeth vanished, investigators obtained a search warrant for the Bustamante home. The FBI's evidence recovery team went through every room with extraordinary care. Behind Alyssa's bedroom door, they found more than typical teenage clutter. The walls contained writings and drawings that disturbed even seasoned officers, references to blood, statements that reflected a deep fascination with violence. But the most damaging piece of evidence was a journal. In it, Alyssa had written an entry dated the evening Elizabeth went missing. The words were clear and cold. She wrote that she had killed someone. She described strangulation, slitting a throat, stabbing. She wrote that the victim was dead. Then she wrote 2 words that would haunt everyone who read them. It was amazing. She added that she felt nervous and shaky. But then she closed with, "Okay, I gotta go to church now, LOL." She wrote that after Elizabeth was already missing. And then she went to a church activity. That single diary entry changed everything. Investigators no longer had only suspicion. They had a confession in the suspect's own handwriting. That same day, Alyssa Bustamante was taken into custody. At 15 years old, she was no longer a witness. She was the prime suspect in the murder of a 9-year-old neighbor. She was brought to an interview room with her grandmother and a juvenile officer present. She was calm at first. She described her Wednesday, school, the bus ride home, hanging out in her room. She said she went for a walk in the forest around 4:35. She was supposed to take her little sister Emma, but she ditched her because Emma was annoying. When asked about Elizabeth, Alyssa called her girly and annoying. Then the detective changed his approach. "Did you do anything to Elizabeth?" "No." "Did you kill her?" "No." Then the detective said, "We have your diary." Alyssa went quiet. She sniffled. The detective pressed, "Where is she?" "I don't know." But the detective told her that the family needed closure. If it was an accident, they could deal with that. Then Alyssa gave her first version. An accident, a fall, death by accident, and she burned the body. Fall does not explain a diary entry describing strangulation and throat cutting. A fall does not explain a pre-dug grave. They returned to the hole. Had she dug it ahead of time? For Elizabeth? Alyssa's answers grew shorter. Finally, she admitted yes. She dug the hole before Elizabeth came to play. Then the detective asked directly, "You knew you were going to kill her, didn't you?" A long silence. Then, almost inaudible, "Yes." In the room, Alyssa's grandmother gasped and cried out. Alyssa began to cry, but the detective did not stop. He asked how she killed Elizabeth. Alyssa said she strangled her with her hands. Then she cut her throat with a kitchen knife. Then she stabbed her. When asked where the knife was, Alyssa said it was in the kitchen sink. She had washed it and left it there. Had she burned the body? No, she admitted. That was a lie. She had buried Elizabeth in the shallow grave. That same day, Alyssa led investigators to the grave, covered with leaves, less than 100 yards from where searchers had walked. The autopsy confirmed every detail. Elizabeth died from a combination of strangulation, a slit throat, and stab wounds. The violence was methodical. The anger was unmistakable. Alyssa Bustamante had not lost control. She had planned the murder for days. Prosecutors moved to try her as an adult. She faced life in prison, or even the death penalties. While awaiting trial, Alyssa spent 18 months in solitary confinement. Her grandparents later said the isolation broke her. She would have agreed to almost anything to escape it. In February 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. In court, she stood shackled and said, "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would. I'm sorry." Elizabeth's family called her an evil monster. The judge sentenced her to life with the possibility of parole, plus 30 years. That meant she would not be eligible for release until the 2040s. Her grandparents were devastated, but accepted the reality. Their granddaughter had done something unthinkable, regardless of what led her there. For years, Alyssa remained in prison. Her grandparents visited. Her brother Nathaniel defended her privately, saying people saw only the villain, not the troubled child behind the crime. In 2021, Missouri passed a law allowing many juvenile offenders a chance at parole after 15 years. That would have meant a hearing for Alyssa in her early 30s. Elizabeth's family fought back. They attended parole hearings. They wrote letters. They refused to let the public forget. In the summer of 2024, Governor Mike Parson signed Senate Bill 754, closing the loophole. Juveniles convicted of second-degree murder would no longer be automatically eligible for parole after 15 years. Alyssa's first parole hearing was pushed back. Her earliest possible release is now decades away, into the 2040s or beyond. Elizabeth Olton's family said the new law brought a measure of peace, not closure. That word does not exist for them. But the knowledge that her killer will remain behind bars for the foreseeable future. A 9-year-old girl who loved to swim and climb trees never made it home. The question why remains buried in the woods.